Welcome back to my channel, guys. So I'm finally going to be talking about one of the most requested topics that I have gotten here in the channel, and that is what I think of Bitcoin. In 2020 it essentially has rallied from $3,700 to over $40,000. Bitcoin officially became the best performing asset of last year, and it is also by far the most controversial asset of 2020. You see, initially I was not planning to make this video at all because of how sensitive the topic is. It seems as if talking about cryptocurrency is the same as talking about politics. You either have people who believe that cryptocurrency is a complete scam and it should be worth $0 and nothing you will ever say will change their minds. And on the other side, you have people who believe that cryptocurrency is the future and that it eventually will be traded for millions of dollars. I'm also fully aware that this video will not please everyone, but I'm open to have a conversation with you guys, so leave a comment down below to share your opinion on this topic. Nevertheless, considering how many people have requested that I would make this video discussing what I think of Bitcoin, I decided to give it a go. But first, I would like to ask you to please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I would really appreciate it and it helps the channel grow. And as promised in my last video, when we hit 1000 subscribers, I will share my whole portfolio and discuss all the shares I own. Alright, in this video I'm going to share my thoughts on Bitcoin, its future as a currency, and what I think it will be worth a couple of years from now. And just as a disclaimer, I'm someone who's interested in all ways of making money and investing. So I'm looking into every viable asset class as long as its return is sufficient enough with respect to the risk I have to take for it. And I will be real with you guys, I have been following it very closely and I have been holding cryptocurrencies since 2016 already. Although it is only a small position in my portfolio, I find it quite fascinating and I can see where the interest is coming from. But I do have some concerns about its sustainability as a currency, and that is exactly what I think we should discuss today. So first, to make my assessment complete, I have to give some information on why I think the price of Bitcoin could go up for many years, and that is because of supply and demand. Bitcoin made its first debut in 2009, and as it gained popularity, it became the best performing asset of the last decade, rising over 9 million%. The Bitcoin concept was anonymously created in the middle of the great financial crisis as a way to create a currency which was completely detached from mainstream banks and government. Bitcoins are being mined using computers, solving complex algorithmic puzzles that progressively get harder and harder to solve over time. And the premise is that there will be only 21 million Bitcoins in existence. And that's it. Currently, about 18.5 million Bitcoins have been mined yet, leaving only another 2.5 million Bitcoins out there ready to be mined. However, because the mining process gets harder and harder to solve over time, it's estimated that it will take 24 more years before the final Bitcoin will be mined. So if you understand the basic rules of supply and demand, if demand increases as Bitcoin is gaining mainstream adoption and supply slows down, it would mean that the price of Bitcoin could keep on rising. Even though the price of Bitcoin has risen 9 million% over the last 10 years, it wasn't without ups and downs. In fact, it's not uncommon for Bitcoin to rally up in price before crashing down 70 to 90%, and again finding a bottom and running back up even higher. There's also been some troubles of theft, fraud, price manipulation, scams, and government regulations, which have put roadblock upon roadblock in front of Bitcoin. Yet, here we are again, close to another all-time high. So what happened? Adoption prior to this demand was mostly trading between individuals who really believed in the concept and exchanged it as a currency to buy pizza, for example, or believed in it as a long-term investment. But lately, big businesses have begun embracing Bitcoin as more than just a random store of value and instead using it as an actual currency, which helped to drive up the demand and prices have begun to skyrocket. Recently, a former Goldman Sachs hedge fund manager said that he believes that the price of Bitcoin could surge to $1 million in the next 5 years, driven by a large wall of money. And then you have stock trading apps like Robinhood and Cash App, for example, who also began incorporating cryptocurrency trading in their platform. And the big news, which really seemed to have pushed Bitcoin to all-time highs, is that 2 months ago, PayPal announced that their users would be able to buy and sell Bitcoin on their platform. They also say that their customers will be able to use cryptocurrency to shop at the 26 million merchants on its network, starting early 2021. And even Booking.com is now adopting Bitcoin on its websites. And because of all the mainstream adoption, there's also a Bitcoin ETF application being filed in Canada for the more passive investors. But if you thought we were done, we're not done quite yet. The world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Coinbase, is planning an IPO this year to become the first ever cryptocurrency exchange listed on Wall Street with an IPO price estimated between $30 and $60 billion. At the end of the day, I have to agree. In the last few months, there's been a big mainstream push towards Bitcoin that didn't exist just a few years ago. Back in 2017, it was driven and manipulated by people who just saw it as a quick way to make money, but without actual utility and adoption, which caused it to crash back down from $20,000 to the mid $3,000 range. Now, even though all of this is really good news for Bitcoin, and it's easy to see why it's done so well recently, still, this run-up really reminds me of 2017, so we should also discuss the bad side about it. First is regulations. To this day, the government is still not able to identify any payments done with Bitcoin. Since every wallet is held anonymously and it is decentralized, the government has no control on all of these transactions. As you may assume already, governments are increasingly trying to enforce laws to oblige crypto holders to identify themselves to their private wallets, where every transaction you do in Bitcoin is recorded publicly in perpetuity. The second is the so-called price manipulation. Now, it was suggested that the parabolic rise of Bitcoin in 2017 was largely driven by coordinated price manipulation. For those not aware, Tether is a cryptocurrency that's meant to mirror the US dollar, and they claim that they hold $1 or its equivalent for every Tether coin. So there's really no difference between $1 and one Tether coin, except that the former is a fiat currency and the latter is a cryptocurrency. But the problem is that there is no actual proof that Tether is indeed backed by the US dollar. And who's gonna say that they are not just taking money and then just creating as much Tether as they want to, buying Bitcoin with it and then driving up the price? As of now, they have refused a true third-party audit on their financials last year. And then third, we got to talk about price volatility. It's not surprising to any of you if I tell you that Bitcoin can go down just as fast as it could go up. In the last few days alone, it went from $30,000 to $40,000, then back to $30,000 and back to $35,000 within a few hours' time. Large sell orders from the so-called whales can easily cause the entire market to drop 5 to 10% in a matter of minutes. But on the other hand, one big purchase can easily cause the entire market to skyrocket instantaneously. And if you look back in history, there have been a lot of major crashes every few years that wipe out the majority of its value. In 2011, for example, we saw a 93% drop. Then in 2013, we saw a 73% drop. In 2015, an 85% drop, and in 2017, an 81% drop. But time after time, Bitcoin continued its rally to hit new all-time highs again. So despite all of that, here's what you came for: my honest thoughts on Bitcoin, and whether or not I see it as a viable investment for most of you guys. People see Bitcoin as a hedge against a weakening currency, and I totally get that. If you live in an emerging country such as Venezuela, where the inflation rates are just skyrocketing. If you are living in the US or Europe, this shouldn't be the only reason to invest in Bitcoin. And I agree with the arguments that people say that the US dollar is probably more manipulated than Bitcoin. The government could just keep on printing more money, but they can't make any more than 21 million Bitcoins. But that is only true to a certain degree. Bitcoin is quoting at this insane price because people give it that price. Much like the US dollar, which is not backed by anything other than that you could exchange a $100 bill for $100 worth of goods. However, the major difference is that the US dollar is backed by the US government, an income-producing country, which is reflected by the GDP, and the fact that everyone universally around the world is going to accept this at face value for what it's worth. And that's not to say that the US dollar is a safer bet to hold on to, because even your dollars will be worth less over time. But this is certainly not going to be dropping 90% in value in a year. And it's also not going to go up 90% in value in a year. The government prefers the stability to make it easier to assess the impact of their policies. The issue I see with Bitcoin is that even though it's being adopted on a large scale, at the end of the day, what people really seem to care about is not so much the technology or the decentralized network or its use as a currency, but instead they just use it as a speculative play to make a quick buck. Now of course I realize you could say that about any investment, but this worries me because traditional investments usually provide either a predefined return or have underlying fundamentals that generate income for the asset and can be more or less valued as an investment itself. But not so much with Bitcoin, which is valued at more than $30,000 just because it's valued at $30,000. And even with all the good news that came out, it's just irrational to me that Bitcoin is now worth 10 times as much as it was on its lowest point several months ago. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point Bitcoin is recognized as a digital gold or store of value. But in order to be used as an actual currency, we can't be having these crazy price fluctuations hour by hour. Perhaps one day cryptocurrencies can be a global reserve currency capable of transferring trillions of dollars around the world in a matter of minutes. Just like with the cryptocurrency Ripple, for example. This coin was backed by a lot of big players in the industry, if I remember correctly from back in the days. But as of right now, we still have a long way to go. We also risk government stepping in and trying to regulate it, or more likely, they create their own cryptocurrency to try to replace it. At the end of the day, no one knows what's going to happen, and there's really not a lot of harm in investing a very small percentage of your overall net worth into Bitcoin just so you have exposure to it. But I certainly would not go all in or invest amounts that you are not comfortable with losing. For example, I did invest 1 to 3% of my investment portfolio into Bitcoin initially, and then whatever happened, happened. If it goes down to nothing, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And if it goes up, then I'm glad it goes up. But it certainly would not be enough to impact the rest of my portfolio, or enough to make me the next millionaire or something. And if you do decide to have a bigger exposure to Bitcoin, I would recommend to use a dollar cost averaging strategy. This way you will never buy at the peak of the market and you could benefit from a dip. Looking back now, investing a bigger amount in Bitcoin would have paid off pretty well. But my investment portfolio would be extremely volatile. And that is exactly something I personally do not feel comfortable with. Ultimately, I'm never going to discourage anyone from investing whatever they are willing to risk as long as they understand exactly what they are investing in. Bitcoin is just something that it's impossible to value. And even though some people might argue it's worth $50,000 by the end of the year, or maybe even $500,000, no one knows. And every guess is just a shot in the dark. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can grow this channel together, and leave your thoughts on Bitcoin in the comment section below. See you in the next one.